And new Israel Adesanya becomes the middleweight king once again after, getting his revenge against Alex Pereira last night and in devastating fashion. And the story behind this and all of the things that go into it, and the fact that Pereira is up 3-0, the fact that the first kickboxing match is debatable who won it, right? A lot of people feel that Izzy won. In the second fight, he had Pereira badly hurt before he was knocked out himself, and he's in the third fight rather, when they get to the UFC, Pereira knocks him out in the 5th round. And that one is kind of decisive, I thought. I thought he definitely got the KO there. But man, the way that Adesanya went out last night and got things done, the way he put Pereira out is one of, I think Joe Rogan nailed it when he said it was one of the greatest knockouts ever, just because of the magnitude of the moment. And it felt like Adesanya had always gotten so close to this guy, and he just kept winning. And, it felt kind of like Pereira might. There were a lot of people going into this saying that they felt like Pereira had Adesanya's number, and it did kind of feel that way. It felt like for whatever reason, the universe or whatever force was working is on Pereira's side. And Izzy was prepared. He went out there and he got the fucking job done against a dangerous opponent. And an interesting fight all the way through. If you look at how it started, and if you look at the matchup overall in MMA, I feel like Izzy is up 5-2. I thought he won round 1 and round 2 last night. And, there was some debate about whether he was playing possum or not, but I just watched the fight back literally 5 minutes ago, and I don't think he was. I do think he was. I do think he was. At first, I doubted it. I thought that he was actually hurt and he maybe decided to just sit down and fire. But I actually do think it was a conscious decision to capitalize on the aggression of Pereira. I think that the way that they got into that situation up against the cage was because Pereira was being effective. He was doing well with his footwork. He was kicking that calf of Izzy. And I think that calf kick did hurt Izzy. But if you watch the replay back in slow motion, Izzy's covering up, looking right down the pipe, and I think he's looking for a read. And that read that he's looking for is that left fucking hook that's so dangerous. And you'll see I think I might do a breakdown on this one. I am not a striking expert, but I think if you watch this back in slow motion, as soon as that left hook of Pereira comes around, Izzy gets hit with a shot to the body first, then he gets hit with a knee. And then when the left hook comes around, Izzy rolls with it, covers up, and as soon as he squares back up, he brings a short left hand inside, right? Pops Pereira before he can get another shot off. Short left hand, conscious left hand, and then the right hand comes over the top and fucking cracks him. Brings it again, catches him with the right, catches him with the left again on the way down, and then hammer fist out cold. Decisive. And again, when I was first watching it, I was like, oh man, Pereira's got him in trouble. This is where he knocked him out last time. But I think that Izzy corrected. I think they game planned for this. I think they prepared for this moment. And they knew that situation where Izzy has his back against the cage may come. And it's like, how can we capitalize on this? And it looked coordinated to me. It looked planned. It could have been a read that Izzy made in that moment somehow, but it looked to me like he was waiting for the left hook. And then the short left came inside, threw off the momentum of the strikes, and the right hand comes over and cracks him. And it looked like a cognizant read to me. I'm not saying that the impact of the blows that Pereira was landing weren't having any effect, but I do think that, like I said, I do think Izzy kind of baited him into the knockout. And you got to think too, a lot of people were thinking coming into this fight that Izzy would lean heavy on the wrestling, me included. I thought he would be mixing it in a lot more. I thought that might be the path to victory. But they just basically had another kickboxing match. And I know that Pereira finished him in the last one, but like I said, I think Izzy's up 5-2. I think he looked really good in round 1. Izzy was really working at it. I mean, Pereira was chewing up the legs, but I thought Izzy was doing a good job of throwing combinations out there. He went to the body a few times. He did a really good job of going to the body when he was fighting out of that southpaw stance. He went to the body with the left leg, and then he started throwing that question mark kick in there and bringing it up top. I thought that he was the one landing the cleaner shots, getting the better of those exchanges, and that's how I felt watching most of their exchanges throughout their career. It is just like, man, does Pereira, he just has this ability to kind of pull it out and finish Adesanya in these moments where it looks like Adesanya might be victorious. Excuse me. So one of the greatest, like I said, stories in UFC history, and how inspiring, and how you could feel all of the raw emotion being released by Adesanya when he celebrated. One of the coldest fucking celebrations in UFC history too. When he was like drawing that bow back, like the way he yelled when he draws the bow back the third time when he lets it go, that was a release. And how good must you feel after wrapping something like that up? And you got to consider, most of the time, if you're down 2, it's very hard to get a third fight with a guy. You might if you go on a run and like you want to try to get it back again, and like you've kind of proven that, you know, and things, the stars all align, you might get the third fight if you're down 2. Maybe. But most of the time, if you're down 2, you don't get the third. To get an opportunity to fight this man for a 4th time, and I understand that the first 2 were in kickboxing, don't get me wrong, but they feel legitimate because, like I said, there was some wrestling mixed in, but primarily these men, even in MMA, have went to war on the feet. So that's why I think those first 2 in kickboxing have so much weight, is because their styles transitioned from their former profession to the new one in MMA. And that's primarily where the fight took place. And a lot of people thought, like I said, that Izzy was going to have to lean on the wrestling, and he proved them wrong, and he did it all on the fucking feet. The way that he pulled this off has to feel so gratifying. Also, to pull that knockout out from the position that Pereira finished you in the last time you guys fought, and to make a course correction and pull it out like that, that's fucking impressive, man. And hats off to Izzy. One of the greatest fucking, like I said, I think Joe Rogan nailed it when he said it was one of the greatest knockouts of all time if you consider the magnitude. This story, this narrative is up there with Jones and Daniel Cormier, you know, some of the biggest rivalries in the sport that you think of. This story will be told throughout time in MMA. And what's next is the question too. I feel like Dana White said in the press conference that Pereira is moving up to 205. And if you consider things from a business perspective, I kind of think that's the best route too. I think 205 needs some eyeballs on it right now. You got Jamal Hill, you got Yuri, but are we really excited about any other 205ers right now? Maybe a couple sprinkled in here and there, right? But you need some talent up there. And I think he could be a motherfucker in that division, you know? And he's a big dude. He's going to be able to, it's probably going to be a relief to not go to 185 for him. And we might see him look more powerful. He's gigantic, man. And you can just tell when you look at him and the way his stance and everything, he just generates so much fucking power effortlessly too. It's crazy. But yeah, impressive win by Izzy. And I think the next step for Izzy is to go on and probably defend, and like, let's see what happens with Whitaker. Well, I don't know, man. They fought twice now already, right? And it's like, who else is there? You got to let 185 start moving along. And Izzy mentioned in the press conference, he wouldn't say the names, but that he would like to fight him in South Africa and like drag his carcass across South Africa. So I think he was referring to Khamzat Chimaev or Dricus du Plessis. But I think it's the right move, because there was this, I know that there's an argument that they should fight a third time, right? But I don't know, man. There was a note of finality when Izzy landed like that last night and put him out cold. And it seemed like when you watch it back and watching it back again, like I said, you notice that it's, at least from my perspective, let me know what you guys think, but from my perspective, it looked intentional. And it looked like Israel he's the more seasoned guy in MMA. He has so many more fights, and he has gone through the fucking fire in the middleweight division and fought a lot of different contenders. Pereira hasn't done that. Pereira's what, 7-2 now? He was 7-1 coming into this fight. Like, Pereira's got to go to another division and start, like, I think, fighting some guys that present new challenges in this sport to him. And, you know, it did just kind of feel like destiny that that he got fast-tracked into fighting Adesanya. Like, it kind of felt like he would follow him wherever he went and just take what was his, right? But Adesanya got it back. And I think Adesanya's next move is I think he can put this behind him, at least for now. Maybe there will be a point somewhere down the road where there is a situation where Adesanya and Pereira have been defending their titles, and maybe it is time to try it one more time. Maybe at catchweight or something. I don't know. But for now, I think for the health of the middleweight division, the best thing is for Izzy to keep defending, and for Pereira to move up in weight and get some eyeballs on that 205-pound division that I think kind of, I don't want to say desperately, but it definitely needs it. He adds a whole new layer of intrigue to light heavyweight. So yeah, we'll see how things play out there. Let's go back through this card and just talk about like kind of the results and the rest of the. I mean, obviously the story in this is Adesanya's revenge, right, and kind of everything that he pulled off. But I'll work back from the beginning. I put a segment out in the last card, or on the last podcast, sorry, where I bet on this card, and I have a spreadsheet that I provided. And in the video, I gave you guys my picks, but I kind of, I guess, ad nauseum added some last minute ones that I didn't include in the YouTube video. Don't worry, they all ended up being losses. But again, I don't even know that anyone's viewed this. I literally just put it up. But I did okay on the betting, at least on the ones that I did in the video, right? So the ones that I picked, and we'll just actually, let's run through each of these fights, and I'll talk about the bets that I placed on them. That'll make more sense. So first fight, Sam Hughes versus Jacqueline Amorim. I just put 1 unit on Sam Hughes. I felt like she was too big of an underdog and that these odds should have been more even. It's not that Jacqueline Amorim isn't talented or couldn't have finished Sam Hughes in that first round. She had her in real danger. But the problem is just what happens after that first round. She hasn't got out of the first round in her entire MMA career, and she came into this fight with 6 professional bouts to her name. Sam Hughes has a little bit more experience, but more importantly, UFC experience, and that matters. One of the most, and you saw this in the Raul Rosas Jr. fight too, to open the main card. You can be very talented and very skilled, but you need to be able to manage the energy and stay calm and cognizant and aware throughout the entire fight. And when you get tired, it's hard to do that. And a lot of the times you see young, inexperienced people making their debut, who really struggle to maintain that calm early in the fight. And that's what happened here. Amorim wore out after the first round when she worked really hard to get Hughes out of there. Hughes is durable as fuck, wasn't able to do it. And ended up fading in the second and third round, and Hughes was able to take over. So big win for Sam Hughes, and kind of a rough welcome to the UFC, but a good welcome in a way that you'll learn to conserve your energy a little bit better and set things up and, pace yourself. Next fight, Steve Garcia knocked out Shailin Nurmagomedov. This is one where I like I said, I just kind of right before the fights, sometimes I do such a good job. I'll analyze everything. I'll pick my bets beforehand. I'm sticking to these. And then as soon as the fights start, I'm on DraftKings betting on everything right before every fight. I'm I'll throw some on this, on this, and this. And that's always how I lose. And in this one, I did the same thing. I put I think I put 2 units on Shailin Nurmagomedov, and he looked good early on, but Steve Garcia came out in that second round, put it on him, and knocked him the fuck out. So, again, mistake there, right? Next fight, Ignacio Bahamondes versus Trey Ogden. I thought DC was spot on in this fight when he said that Ogden just needed to go more. He was finding success, but it was a little bit lackluster, right? He just needed to pull the trigger more, and he didn't do that, and it ended up leaning in favor of Ignacio, who picked up the unanimous decision win. Another fight that I bet on, and this one I'm not as upset with myself if I'm honest. Lupi Godinez versus Cynthia Calvillo. I threw 2 units on this one last minute, and I put the money on Cynthia Calvillo because she was such a big dog. I think I put 2 units on Cynthia Calvillo. And this fight was interesting, and I'm not upset with it because I do feel like it was close. But if I'm being honest with myself, I thought Lupi Godinez won the fight. I do think at the end of the day, Cynthia threw more volume and landed more, but nothing that she really landed ever felt like it had significance or hurt Lupi, and it just seemed like Lupi's shots were really having an effect on Cynthia throughout the fight. And I know people were upset about the 30-27 in this one, but I personally didn't think this one was that egregious. I thought that if you're considering, like I said, the impact of the shots, Lupi Godinez did a good job of having the more impactful shots for sure. And at 30-27, I didn't think that was so bizarre. I know Cynthia got the takedown in that first round, but like I said, I kind of thought that Lupi, for the most part, just controlled the exchanges and had more meaningful blows. But yeah, I wasn't upset with that one because it was a close fight. I felt like it would be a close fight, and I thought that the odds were just a little bit skewed. So not too upset with putting money on Cynthia Calvillo in that situation, but it still didn't pan out. Next fight, we move up to the prelims that started on ESPN. Joe Pyfer versus Gerald Meerschaert. And Joe Pyfer, man, he looked good last night, and that's a big name in Gerald Meerschaert. And if you watch MMA religiously, you've seen the name Meerschaert, and you know that he's not a slouch. He's not exactly what I would consider to be a world-class contender or anything like that, but he is a veteran. He is talented in the grappling department, and he has good kicks to the body and stuff that he sets up. He's a hard guy to deal with. And Joe Pyfer just kind of went out there, controlled the footwork, marched him down, and picked up the big win, man. And that Philadelphia squad is looking pretty good with the likes of him, Sean Brady, the Dawkins brothers out in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is kind of on the up and up right now, which is exciting because I'm from Pennsylvania. You guys probably know I'm an Eagles fan. I'm not from the east side of the state. I'm actually from a small town on the west side of the state, but I didn't grow up with my parents as Steelers fans, so that's why I'm an Eagles fan. I just kind of picked my own team, and I thought the Eagles were fucking sweet back when they had McNabb and Westbrook and Dawkins. All the Weapons X things were getting aired on YouTube, and I was always watching highlight videos, and I got obsessed. That's how I got to be an Eagles fan. But anyway, I'm not from there, but it's exciting to see like a school or like an academy or just an area in Pennsylvania start to get really hot in the MMA world, because we don't have that on the west side of the state or in the state in general, really. There have been some professional guys that have come out of Pennsylvania and stuff. I'm not saying that, or like that wrestled at universities in Pennsylvania, but like Pittsburgh, for example, isn't really known for its MMA scene. And it feels like Philadelphia has kind of busted through the mold and gotten some guys in the upper echelons of the sport in the UFC that are kind of making a name for themselves and beating tough competition. So, yeah, big win for Joe Pyfer representing Philadelphia. Luana Pinheiro versus Michelle Waterson Gomez. This was a good fight, and I thought that Luana won. Kind of the same story again with the damage and stuff and impact. I don't know. But Michelle Waterson is one of those people who you kind of like underestimate every time a little bit, or at least I do. And then I watch her fight and go, fuck, Michelle's really good. She's really talented everywhere. She uses her lead leg really well. She's got pretty good jiu-jitsu and stuff. She's a hard problem to deal with, and she comes in and I think she fights very well and very intelligently every time she steps into the octagon. So to see that she got an 8-fight deal and will be around for a little bit longer is exciting. And she came into this fucking fight shredded. So unfortunate that she lost, but yeah, tough one and close fight. But the next one, Kelvin Gastelum versus Chris Curtis. This is where I can understand if you get a little more upset about the 30-27, because I think this is a little more egregious. But Gastelum, through the first 2 rounds of this fucking fight, looked like a world beater. And this is why coming into this one, I put 3 units on Kelvin Gastelum, just money line, straight out. I felt like Gastelum, when he is going, man, he is a bad motherfucker. And Curtis, not necessarily, he's a thick guy and he's got knockout power. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't belong at 185, but he's a little bit shorter in stature. Probably wasn't going to wrestle, Gastelum as much as guys like Whitaker did. So I thought this was a favorable matchup for Kelvin Gastelum. And Gastelum's just fucking good, man. He's very smooth on the feet. He does have that wrestling in his back pocket. And I still feel that there was a moment in time, especially, or like a large window maybe, potentially even now, I don't know, where if Gastelum had his diet and everything figured out and honed in and could have made the weight at 170, he really would have been a world champion. I really feel that. Kelvin Gastelum is so fucking good and so underrated, and has had so many. You think about the fight that he gave Israel Adesanya. Think about the war that they got in. Kelvin Gastelum is the real fucking deal, and not that Chris Curtis isn't. Chris Curtis had a great 3rd round. That's why I'm saying, like, I don't understand the 30-27 necessarily, because Curtis went out there and I thought undoubtedly won the 3rd round. He was digging that uppercut, working the body. He was just landing effectively, and he stayed pretty defensively sound throughout the entire fight, despite Gastelum landing the cleaner shots and, getting out of the way of a lot of Curtis's. He just glides in and out of range so smoothly, Gastelum does. And for the first 2 rounds, looked incredible. And this was a war too, so great fucking fight. Big win for Kelvin Gastelum to get back on track, and a tough one for Chris Curtis, but a lot of promise at the end there. And fights like that, they're not going to damage your UFC career. You're going to be around getting matchups after a fight like that. So I don't think it's all bad news for Chris Curtis. And to be, on that ESPN slot, that headlining spot where that's probably playing at like a lot of the bars and shit, and a fight like that, yeah, I think he made a big name for it. I think he did. He represented himself well in that fight. Let's say that. Next fight, first bout on the main card. This is where I fucked up, because I thought coming into this that Raul Rosas Jr. would win, but the odds were like a little bit skewed. But then I started thinking about it, and I was like, no, I think Rosas Jr. is a lot more skilled than Rodriguez. And I don't know how I looked at the Sam Hughes-Zamarim fight and thought about all the inexperience and stuff and didn't weigh how important that would be in this fight where Rosas Jr. is a young kid making his debut on a main card pay-per-view with the likes of Jorge Masvidal and Gilbert Burns and Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira, like we talked about at the beginning, one of the most storied there's a lot of pressure there, and you want to start things off and be exciting, and he tried to do that, and boy, did it backfire. I thought that he would come out. I really think that, and I'd still believe this, and this is just an honest assessment, I think that Rosas Jr., if you look at the things that he can do and what he's capable of, I think he's a more skilled fighter than Christian Rodriguez. I do. But the most important thing when you start getting to this level is you have to learn how to conserve your energy. In the instances like Amorim versus Hughes, if you cannot get your opponent out of there in that first round and you exert a lot of energy trying to do so, or working really hard for takedowns that maybe aren't there because you're not setting them up with your hands first, which is what Rosas did. I mean, he came out and fucking just basically sprinted across the octagon and shot immediately. And it's like, yeah, you can do that, but Khamzat Chimaev does that, but if you watch what Khamzat does, because it's an MMA fight, hands are always going up first. He's always getting offense going up, and once your hands come up, he's under on the hips. You can't shoot naked. And Raul Rosas Jr. ran across the octagon and shot naked, tried to chain wrestle from there. A lot of the attempts got shut down. Granted, he did get the fight to the ground, but it was not easy work to keep it there, and he burned himself out. And then you started to see, as he tried to wrestle up, his hips didn't want to keep turning over anymore, and that's a good indicator that you're tired. I know, because I have it happen to me all the fucking time when I'm rolling. You try to turn your hips up, and you'll kind of just concede the position and go to your back because it's less work than continuing to wrestle up. That's usually a sign that you're tired, and then it started to show through as Rodriguez started taking his back and stuff. So I think that Rosas Jr. has a bright future, but I think that this was a wake-up call. I think that it will be good for his career because it will show him that you do have to conserve your energy. You do have to set things up. You can't just be shooting blind on guys because you think you're a superior wrestler. This is a different level, and you're in a different, you're in a way bigger atmosphere. There's a lot of pressure on these things, and these guys are prepared. These guys are prepared, man. So he just needs to make the adjustments and work on the energy expenditure and setting the wrestling up. It can't all be blind. You got to be careful not to swing back too far the other way and not be aggressive at all because you're afraid of burning yourself out. You see that a lot of the times when guys like Raul Rosas Jr., when they suffer a loss like this, in their next fight, even if they win, they might even lose because they have this tendency to conserve, don't want to burn myself out, and then they fall too far to this side of the spectrum. There's a balance that you have to hit where you can be going at a solid pace consistently for 15 minutes, right? That's what Raul Rosas Jr. needs to work on. Once he figures that out, I think he's going to be just fine. Next fight, Kevin Holland versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. And man, there are moments when Kevin Holland looks like he could be a world fucking champion. No joke. The guy is so talented, and there are things that he can do in there that are super creative, and he can generate a lot of leverage and power in weird positions that you don't see a lot. I think he brings a lot to the table in terms of entertainment value, and I think he's very skilled. There are things that he struggles with, and I think that a lot of that is due to him. He has fun in the octagon, man. He likes to talk, and I don't know that his goal has necessarily been a singular tunnel vision focus on getting the UFC title. I don't know that that's been true for him, but I think that if he would do that and make the adjustments that he needs to and fill in some of the gaps and really set his sights on gold, you could see this guy. There are so many flashes of brilliance. I really think you could see him climb through those rankings and make a run at the title. He's just so unique. That's how I would categorize Kevin Holland, is he's unique. Like when Ponzinibbio caught that kick and he just back-fisted him and dropped him, the way he knocked out Jacare, and even his left hook, it wasn't like a traditional sit-down, he kind of reached out with it, but he's got so much leverage that he generates with those long punches, and he clipped Santiago with that long left hook after hurting him and put him the fuck out, man. Face planted, and Santiago protested, but there was no doubt. I mean, the way he fell on his face and Holland was following up, that was going to continue to happen until the ref decided to interject. That was a good stoppage. And Kevin Holland, man, I'm telling you, if he just decides that this is my only focus. This is the only thing I care about, is getting to the title. He's somebody who I think could really make a run at it. I think there's so many flashes of brilliance that we've seen that it's not outside of the realm of possibility to think that for him. And for Santiago Ponzinibbio, man, a tough loss. But this is what worried me coming into this fight for Santiago, is he's been rocked a lot in his most recent fights. In a lot of his fights, actually, throughout his career. And I just felt like with someone like Holland, man, he can make you pay the price, and he's really hard to hit. And like I said, he hits you from unorthodox spots and places where you can't touch him. So tough matchup for Santiago, tough loss. Next was a matchup in the bantamweight division. Rob Font versus Adrian Yanez. And Rob Font is the fucking man. Rob Font is so good, guys. And we talked about this in the breakdown, and this is why I bet on Rob Font in this. Rob Font is a veteran, and I felt like this was a very big leap up in competition for Adrian Yanez. He beat, who was it? It was like Davey Grant and then Tony Kelly. And don't get me wrong, the way he knocked Tony Kelly out was fucking super impressive. I think Adrian Yanez might have some of the smoothest hands in terms of how he throws his combinations in the entire UFC, right? But the problem is that this isn't a boxing match, and Rob Font has one of the best jabs in the entire bantamweight division, and he stuck it out there. And so often in MMA, you see that the person who goes first sets and dictates the pace, and I feel like that's kind of what we saw. The jab led into Font finding that uppercut and everything that he was landing, and man, he got Adrian Yanez out of there and knocked him out in the very first round. And a big return for Font after suffering a couple of tough losses against Jose Aldo and Chito Vera. So this was a big rebound fight for Rob Font and a big win over a guy who I think a lot of people, I think they thought Yanez was just going to come in and box Font up. But man, it is important to lead the dance. And when you look to counter and a guy's sticking the jab in your face and you can't find answers to that, he's going to start timing things off of that counter. And that's exactly what we saw Rob Font do. I thought Yanez should have fought somebody else first in between this, but I understand the desire to push him up if you think he's capable of it. It's not like Yanez looked incompetent or wasn't landing in some of the exchanges. Font just got going, man, and Font has a gas tank and he throws volume too. So just felt like it was a favorable matchup for Rob Font, and he just fucking got Yanez out of there in the very first round. So brilliant showing from him and a way to get back on track and get back in the win column. And now I think we'll see Adrian Yanez probably go and fight somebody more appropriate for where he's at in his career right now. You know, like I said, I just felt like this was a big jump. Yanez could have pulled it off, but, you know, we got to see that Font, and I think his veteran experience really shone through in that fight. So, yeah, moving on. The last fight I want to talk about, last one on the fucking card, Gilbert Burns versus Jorge Masvidal, right? Jorge Masvidal obviously retired at the end of this one, and man, it just felt watching this like it was a little bit sad to me. But good timing on the exit for Jorge. It felt to me like one of the things that used to make Jorge so dangerous was his hands too. Like Jorge had good hands, man. Jorge could box. And I feel like in the exchanges, in the striking exchanges with Burns, he was a little more hesitant to throw his hands because I think that he was reaching for things a little bit more, and Burns was winning those boxing exchanges. 3 or 4 years ago, you might have a different story on your hands, maybe a more aggressive Jorge, more willing to sit in the pocket. But, man, Burns, I felt like just kind of bullied Masvidal. Also, I thought this fight was a clear 30-27 for Gilbert Burns. I thought that he dominated every fight, or every round, and I thought that he did something of significance in every round. Whereas again, with Jorge, I feel like the only thing that really was working for him were some of the kicks. Wasn't really finding success with the hands, felt like he was reaching a little bit, and Gilbert just kept landing big shots with on the feet, and maybe not hurting Masvidal, like really putting him in danger of being out, but definitely cracking him. And you know that when Masvidal starts taking his tongue out, it's because you cracked him with something good. He has a tendency to do that. And Burns was doing that often last night. Masvidal's tongue was out quite a bit. So, but we saw Masvidal retire, and I was thinking about this. And first off, I want to talk about what a true rags to riches story this is. I mean, you're talking about a guy with 50-plus professional MMA fights. He's been around the UFC for forever, right? Came up street fighting videos with Kimbo Slice, and then kind of goes through this journeyman's career, not to be offensive to Jorge Masvidal. It's just a word to categorize it. I mean, I loved watching all of his fights, but he goes through this, what you could call a journeyman career, and then has one of the greatest resurgences like ever. Comes out, starches Darren Till, knocks out Ben Askren. And the way that he knocked him out and how viral that went, I mean, that's one of the most iconic moments in UFC history. That highlight will be played throughout the rest of mixed martial or UFC. Like every UFC event for all time, that will probably be played. When they do the Teenage Wasteland and shit, every time you talk about Jorge Masvidal, you will think about that knee first. I do. That's what I jump to. Regardless of how bad he knocked Till out, you think about the Askren flying knee. And then that led to him being set up to fight Nate Diaz for the BMF title. I mean, there was a moment in time where Jorge Masvidal achieved real elite superstardom in the UFC. And that's what I mean by the rags to riches story. I know that he never held the title, but man, what he was able to achieve and accomplish, you got to be proud of that as a martial artist. To come from where he came from and go through what he did to get to where he was and to make it to the top of the sport in terms of eyeballs on you, and being a fan favorite, what more can you ask for, man? I think there's a good debate that Jorge Masvidal makes the Hall of Fame. I know that's probably a questionable statement, but if you look at Donald Cerrone's career and Jorge Masvidal's, to me, they're two very comparable fighters. And I think with the highlights that, Jorge's had on his record or on his resume, I think he might make it in. I really do. I think he's one of those guys who's done so much he fought most of his entire career in the UFC, a lot of fights in the UFC. Maybe not. I don't know if literally most. I don't know if it was more than half, but I'd imagine he fought so many fights in the fucking UFC. And I just feel like he was a real pioneer of the sport. He fought so many talented guys, and he has that fucking, like, those highlight reels, like, on his record. And, to see him drop 4 in a row at the end of his career is tough, but they all came against elite competition. And like I said, that resurgence, Darren Till, Askren, Diaz, man, that was some of the, like, funnest shit to watch. And then there was all this buzz about whether he's going to fight Conor. I don't know, man. Jorge might have pulled it off. And he's got a lot of other things going for him on the business side of the house. He's got his own fight promotion and stuff. So it seems like a good time to walk away. Also, I know Gilbert Burns had an impressive performance, right? But I think this kind of went how everyone thought it was going to go. He kind of bullied Jorge around. And it's not that the win wasn't impressive, but Jorge's retiring, and this is what the story is, right? Like, I also feel that Jorge doesn't get enough credit for being as well-rounded as he is. He's very hard to submit. He wasn't knocked out all that often throughout his career. I mean, the one against Usman was really the only bad one that I can think of. Was he ever TKO'd? Yeah, 2 TKOs. Who was the other one? Holy fuck, you got to go back here. That was back in 2008 when he was fighting he wasn't even in the UFC at that time. So, like I said, bad motherfucker. And, I don't want to take away the shine from Gilbert, but I just feel like Jorge never really got the credit for being as good as he was. He was very talented on the feet, hard to put away, good at getting back to his feet when he was taken down, good submission defense, just a hard guy to deal with and a well-rounded martial artist. So I think he deserves that credit. But anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Thank you guys for listening to me for the past, how long has it been? Half hour or so. I appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. If you made it to the end of this podcast, guys, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you thought of the fights down in the comments, and I will catch you guys next time. We got Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen next weekend, so I'm going to work on getting a breakdown out and predictions for those fights, and I'll talk to you guys then. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Bye-bye. Have a good day. Happy Easter.